Hi, I'm Nate Seberg, and this is One Day Ahead. Welcome to One Day Ahead, To Kill a Mockingbird, chapters 28 through 31. Here, we dive into a summary and analysis of Harper Lee's 1960s classic. If you're an educator, check out my teaching unit. It's got everything you need, link below. As ever, these are not spoiler-free videos, but if you're good to go, then play with a switchblade and cover up a homicide, because it's time to dive into chapters 28 through 31. So it's Halloween night, and with Jem carrying Scout's giant ham costume, the Finch children depart for the carnival pageant, the thing. As they walk, Lee drops some geography on us. The school is just past the Radley house, then across a field. That field is attended by a huge oak tree, which Lee pauses to describe to us for no reason. Obviously, this thing is going to matter in a hot second, otherwise, why bring it up? Chekhov's oak tree over here. The night is pitch black, like bump into things dark, and the lights blazing in the school serve only to blind them further. Suddenly, a figure leaps out, and we learn it's Cecil Jacobs playing a hilarious prank. They play at the school for a while, then it's pageant time. After the national anthem is played, because I guess that's what you do, the bass drum sounded. Miss Merriweather, stationed behind her lectern behind the band, said, "Macomb County, ad astra per aspera." Aspera? Probably aspera. The bass drum boomed again. "That means," said Miss Merriweather, translating for the rustic elements, "from the mud to the stars." She added unnecessarily, it seemed to me, "a pageant." Backstage, Scout is stuffed into her costume, where she is supposed to wait for her cue. She tucks her legs in and sits down to wait, but the repetitive boom of the bass drum between droning lines of Miss Merriweather soon lulls her to sleep. They said later that Mrs. Merriweather was putting her all into the grand finale. She had crooned, "Pork," with a confidence born of pine trees and butter beans entering on cue. She waited a few seconds, then called, "Pork!" When nothing materialized, she yelled, "Pork!" Jolted awake by the band playing Dixie and realizing she'd missed her cue, Scout runs on right as Miss Merriweather is mounting the stage with the state flag. The audience erupts in laughter. Mrs. Merriweather seemed to have a hit. Everyone was cheering so, but she caught me backstage and told me I had ruined her pageant. What a lovely woman. Scout is mortified, and though Jem tries to cheer her up, she refuses to leave backstage until the crowd has cleared out. To help better hide her shame, Scout elects to keep the ham costume on for her dark walk home. And it's here that this book pivots super hard, because the next few pages veer our story into something verging on a full-on thriller novel. The kids walk home, stepping out of the auditorium and back into that enveloping night. They set off across the pitch black yard and are nearing the end when Jem begins to hear faint noises trailing them. As the tension mounts, the kids try to convince themselves it's Cecil Jacobs again, more of his scaring shenanigans, but when they call out, they get no response, and that silence is ominous. They set out again in the pitch black, and their menacing pursuer does too. Each time they stop, so do the steps behind them. Our company shuffled and dragged his feet, as if wearing heavy shoes. Whoever it was wore thick cotton pants. What I thought were trees rustling was the soft swish of cotton on cotton. Weak, weak, with every step. In agonizing silence, Jem and Scout finally make it across the yard. I felt the sand go cold under my feet, and I knew we were near the big oak. Jem pressed my head. We stopped and listened. Shufflefoot had not stopped with us this time. His trousers swished softly and steadily. Then they stopped. He was running towards us with no child's steps. "Run, Scout, run, run!" Jem screamed. Scout makes a go for it, but in her costume, she can only take these little waddling steps, and she falls down almost immediately. "Jem, Jem, help me, Jem!" Something crushed the chicken wire around me. Metal ripped on metal, and I fell to the ground and rolled as far as I could, floundering to escape my wire prison. Someone rolled against me, and I felt Jem. He was up like lightning and pulling me with him. We were nearly to the road when I felt Jem's hand leave me. I felt him jerk backwards to the ground. More scuffling, and there came a dull crunching sound, and Jem screamed. This section is all confusion, disorientation for Scout. Encased in her hand costume, she's interpreting events through sound and touch. She knows Jem is down and hurt, and when she regains her feet, she sets off running in his general direction. But instead of finding Jem, she runs headlong into a flabby male stomach, which, God, that's gross. Its owner said, "Ugh," and tried to catch my arms, but they were tightly pinioned. His stomach was soft, but his arms were like steel. He slowly squeezed the breath out of me. I could not move. In this moment, her and our confusion mounts because Flabby Stomach is suddenly and violently snatched and flung to the ground. There's a scuffle and a wheeze, and the night was still again. Still, but for a man breathing heavily and staggering. It was slowly coming to me that there were now 4 people under the tree. Still disoriented, she moves again towards where Jem last screamed. She finds someone. My toes touch trousers, a belt buckle, buttons, something I could not identify, a collar and a face. A prickly stubble on the face told me it was not Jem's. I smelled stale whiskey. She rises and, still encased in her cured meat costume, spies a figure. The man was walking with the staccato steps of someone carrying a load too heavy for him. He was carrying Jem. Jem's arm was dangling crazily in front of him. So that was a hot mess, but we will soon piece it together. When Scout gets home, Atticus and Alexandra are behaving with barely controlled panic, anger, and confidence. They divide and conquer, with Alexandra seeing to Scout and Atticus to Jem. They place 2 urgent phone calls, first for the doctor, then for the sheriff, Heck Tate. Scout is unhurt, but she is in shock. She keeps repeating the same question. Atticus, is Jem dead? Atticus says no, and Alexandra extracts her from the crushed chicken wire costume with trembling fingers. The doctor arrives first and looks to the children. He is in with Jem for 10 forevers before he emerges to check out Scout. And after, seriously, 3 more is Jem deads, she is finally allowed in to go see for herself. Jem is sedated with his arm splinted, well, both really. Satisfied that Jem is indeed not dead, she surveys the room. It's then that she notices the man who brought Jem in was standing in the corner, leaning against the wall. He was some countryman I did not know. He must have heard our screams and come running. Heck Tate arrives, and he looks sharply at the stranger in the corner, nods, and gives his report. His findings are interesting. Out in the yard, under the tree, he found a dress belonging to an 8-year-old girl, some funny pieces of muddy cloth, and Bob Ewell lying on his back, dead with a kitchen knife sticking out of his chest, which is quite the thing. Oh, a lot of plot to get to. Chapter 29 has Scout recounting the night for Heck. We run through the events again, but we glean some new information along the way. Heck reckons, so I'm not really a person who says reckons, but this is Heck Take, and he probably does. He reckons that the costume probably saved her life. He said, look, he pointed with a long forefinger. A shiny, clean line stood out on the dull wire. Bob Ewell meant business, Mr. Tate muttered. That shiny clean line crossing multiple strands of the wire, that was made by a slashing knife. Scout tells her story up to the moment when help arrived. Heck asks, who was it? Why, there he is, Mr. Tate. He can tell you his name. He was still leaning against the wall, his arms folded across his chest. As I pointed, he brought his arms down and pressed the palms of his hands against the wall. They were white hands, sickly white hands that had never seen the sun. When I pointed to him, his palms slipped slightly, leaving greasy sweat streaks on the wall. A strange, small spasm shook him, as if he heard fingernails scrape on slate. His lips parted into a timid smile, and our neighbor's image blurred with my sudden tears. Hey, Boo, I said. And that's chapter 29. In 30, Dr. Reynolds enters and promptly kicks everyone out. Thinking that Boo would prefer the dark porch over the bright living room, Atticus suggests they go outside. And all right, it's entirely possible that you are going to think that I am making way too big of a deal out of this next part, but listen. As the men file out of the room, Scout steps to Boo. Come along, Mr. Arthur, I heard myself saying. You don't know the house real well. I'll just take you to the porch, sir. He looked down at me and nodded. Feeling slightly unreal, I led him to the chair furthest from Atticus and Mr. Tate. It was deep in shadow. Boo would feel more comfortable in the dark. Guys, she's doing it. This thing that I've been talking about every freaking episode since the start of the book, she is empathizing. She's putting herself in someone else's shoes and then acting on that information. Boo has gone from a cartoonish specter that haunted her nightmares to someone she can understand enough that she can anticipate his needs. And her first instinct is not one of dull voyeuristic fascination or exploitation or like morbid sideshow gawking curiosity. It is to take care of him. She takes him by the hand, empathizes, and acts on what she finds. She brings him to the darkest part of the porch. What else do you want in a kid? Come on. All right, enough of that. We need to run through the conversation between Heck and Atticus on that porch. And if you've read this already and you got a little lost, you are not alone, because it is easily the most confusing section of the book. But it's also really important. The thing that is not explained and is not immediately obvious is that Atticus and Heck are not on the same page about what has transpired here. Atticus has made an assumption about what happened in that yard, and he is wrong. But the thing is, Heck can't come right out and explain it to him either. He is hinting. He is trying to help Atticus put something together, something really important. So stay with me, because this is going to take me roughly forever. Atticus starts by talking about how Jem, who is 13, will need to stand trial for killing Bob, and that it's a clear-cut case of self-defense. Heck is all, what are you talking about? Jem didn't kill him. So Heck really means that, but Atticus takes it as an offer to cover up and save Jem the trouble of the trial. Atticus is all, that's really nice of you, Heck, but don't do that. Don't hush this up. That's not how we do things in our family. Mr. Finch, Mr. Tate said stolidly, Bob Ewell fell on his knife. He killed himself. Okay, but here's the thing, and it's what makes this even more confusing. Heck doesn't actually believe that either, that Bob killed himself. He's lying. Atticus hasn't considered a third option, that it wasn't Bob falling on his own knife or Jem killing him, it was something else, and Heck really needs Atticus to figure this out. So the standoff continues, they go back and forth, then Heck tries a new approach. He decides to act it out, and for a prop, Mr. Tate reached in his side pocket and withdrew a long switchblade knife, which is a weird thing for him just to be carrying around. Okay, so he shows how he could have stumbled and fallen, his own weight like driving the knife into his chest. As he's acting this out, the doctor comes through on his way to examine Bob's body. Heck points the way to the tree, and the doctor asks if that switchblade he's holding is the knife that killed him. No, sir, that knife's still in him. It looks like a kitchen knife from the handle. All right, we are almost there. Atticus still won't leave his corner. I won't have it, Atticus said softly. Heck finally loses his cool. God damn it, I'm not thinking of Jem. Mr. Finch, I hate to fight you like this. You've been under a strain tonight no man should ever have to go through. For once you haven't been able to put two and two together, and we've got to settle this tonight because tomorrow it'll be too late. Bob Ewell's got a kitchen knife in his craw. A kitchen knife, he says, while standing there casually holding a switchblade. Heck, said Atticus abruptly. That switchblade, where'd you get it? Took it off a drunk man, Mr. Tate answered coolly. So there it is at last. When he saw the attack unfolding, Boo snatched up the first weapon he could find, a kitchen knife, and ran into the night. There, he called upon his past history of stabbing people and killed Bob Ewell by putting that knife through his chest. When Heck saw the scene and understood what had happened, he pocketed Bob's switchblade and is now making out like he fell on his own kitchen knife. He isn't trying to protect Jem, he's trying to protect Boo. He says, there's a black boy dead for no reason, and the man responsible for it's dead. Maybe you'll say it's my duty to tell the town all about it and not hush it up. You know what happened then? All the ladies in Maycomb, including my wife, be knocking on his door bringing angel food cakes. To my way of thinking, Mr. Finch, taking the one man who's done you and this town a great service and dragging him with his shy ways into the limelight, to me that's a sin. I may not be much, Mr. Finch, but I'm still sheriff of Maycomb County, and Bob Ewell fell on his knife. Good night, sir. The guy's awesome. Atticus, defeated, exhausted, watches Heck drive away before returning to Scout, asking if she can possibly understand why they're choosing to lie. Scout replies yes, that Mr. Tate is right, that outing Boo, well, it'd be sort of like shooting a mockingbird, wouldn't it? Atticus buries his face in her hair, then turns to go in, but before he went inside the house, he stopped in front of Boo Radley. Thank you for my children, Arthur, he said. And that's chapter 30. Goodness. All right, 31, last one. Scout finds herself alone on the porch with Boo. He indicates with a nod that he wants to say goodbye to Jem. After, his hand tightened on mine and he indicated that he wanted to leave. I led him to the front porch where his uneasy steps halted. He was still holding my hand and he gave no sign of letting me go. Will you take me home? He almost whispered it in the voice of a child afraid of the dark. Scout walks him home. When they arrive at the porch, Boo releases her arm, opens the door, and, without a word, passes inside. I never saw him again. Scout loiters on the porch for a moment and imagines things from his, this time literal, perspective. Daylight in my mind. It was summertime, and two children scampered down the sidewalk toward a man approaching in the distance. The man waved, and the children raced each other to him. Summertime, and the children played in the front yard with their friend, enacting a strange little drama of their own invention. Fall, and the children trotted to and fro around the corner, the day's woes and triumphs on their faces. Winter, and a man walked into the street, dropped his glasses, and shot a dog. Summer, and he watched his children's heart break. Autumn again, and Boo's children needed him. She leaves the porch and feels suddenly grown up on the walk home. She reflects on how far her and Jem have come. As I made my way home, I thought Jem and I would get growing, but there wasn't much else left for us to learn, except possibly algebra. It's after midnight and she finds the house dark, but Atticus is sitting up in Jem's room, reading something he picked up off of Jem's shelf, The Gray Ghost. She wants to sit up too, so Atticus reads aloud to her. Exhausted, she drops off. The next thing she knows, Atticus is leading her to bed. Sleepy, she claims to have heard every word you said, I muttered. Wasn't sleep at all. She mumbles through some disconnected pieces of plot from the book. Some boys are looking for this other boy who they think ruined their clubhouse. And they chased him and never could catch him because they didn't know what he looked like. And Atticus, when they finally saw him, why, he hadn't done any of those things. Atticus, he was real nice. His hands were under my chin, pulling up the covers, tucking it around me. Most people are, Scout, when you finally see them. In case it's not totally obvious, we're really talking about Boo here. Okay, you knew that. Atticus turns out the light, shuts the door, and sits with Jem through the night. and that is To Kill a Mockingbird. So each chapter, we are going to explore the themes and characters by going just a step or two beyond what's on the page. This is Deep Dive Quotes. So the first one is a small thing, but in the dark and confusion of the attack, Scout happens upon a body on the ground. We get this: my toes touch trousers, a belt buckle, buttons, something I could not identify, a collar, and a face. So that something she could not identify is the handle of the knife protruding out of his chest. So that's fun. All right, last quote before we do some final thoughts. Atticus fetched the remains of my costume. Mr. Tate turned it over and bent it around to get an idea of its former shape. This thing probably saved her life, he said. So, throughout the whole novel, Scout has encountered evil, but she has always been at least partially shielded by her age. The trial is like the best example, obviously. Jem, who is older, is utterly rocked by it, but Scout is sad, I guess, but certainly confused, but not like disillusioned or bitter or destroyed. She is protected by her youth. And it's the same thing here, and I love it, because what protects her during the attack that was meant to take her life? That stupid ham costume. It's perfect. This absurd waddling costume is like her childhood innocence given form here, literally protecting her from the worst of evil. I know that's a little English teacher of me to love it so much, but I just do. Saved by a ham costume. I mean, come on. To conclude this series, I want to leave you with some final thoughts. I opened it by telling you what this book is about at its most distilled, at its core. This story is about a little girl who loses her innocence to evil, but is able to hold on to her goodness by practicing powerful, wholehearted empathy. And that is what happened. She did lose her innocence after encountering real evil. Between the wrongful conviction and death of Jim and the attack by Bob, she saw the worst her society had to offer. And while she emerged with her innocence stripped away, she is both physically and psychologically unharmed. We see no trace of the damage these experiences really should have engendered in a person, and those dangers are very real. In fact, if you stop to think about it, as this story unfolded, we encountered the other paths that she could have potentially taken. They were represented by the people in her town. What other paths? Well, Scout could luxuriate in the drama of it all, like Miss Stephanie Crawford, could hide her true beliefs, like Dolphus Raymond. She could turn to bitterness, like Miss Dubose, to say nothing of hard drugs, or revel in the attention that comes from ostentatiously supporting people on the other side of the world while ignoring the downtrodden here at home, like Miss Merriweather and Miss Gates. She could retreat from it altogether, like Boo, obsess over family status like Aunt Alexandra, or lest we forget, she could simply join the legions of the quietly prejudiced who, in the name of tranquility, unfailingly uphold the status quo in Maycomb and largely think of themselves as moral, upstanding people. But instead of all of that, guided by Atticus, she walks another path, a narrow one, where she can find the goodness in her neighbors. She could see them as good people making bad choices. If she can find her way to empathize with Boo, this middle-aged shut-in she has never actually met before this night and who says only 5 words in the entire novel, she can empathize with anyone. And that's all great, good for her, but notice that things are not fixed here. This isn't a story where good triumphs over evil, not at all, because Jim is still dead. Helen's still widowed. Mayella's still destitute. Boo is still agoraphobic and likely deficient in vitamin D. There is still so much darkness that is unresolved, but now, here at the end, we see how the evil that is revealed as the kids grow, the evil that lurks beneath the surface of this sleepy southern town, is balanced by virtuous people who do virtuous things, like Atticus, Miss Maudie, Calpurnia, and Boo. And that feels like a good place to end. Not wrapped up with a bow, not fixed, messy, broken, but with agency in the hands of good people who are willing to fight, in Boo's case, literally, for a better tomorrow. And that's chapter 28 through 31. Thank you for watching. Thank you for going on this journey with me. Please comment, subscribe, like all of the things. Also, the thumbnail art for this series was created by one of my students, the super talented Kaiah Caru. You can see more of her work by following the link in the thing. She is awesome. All right, everybody, thank you again. If you have book requests, drop them in the comments below. That's all we got. We'll see you next time on One Day Ahead.